Stars are just a 9 patch, and the blocks that you use to make a 9 patch can make a wonderful starry quilt. In this picture, I have the center block, and it is made of crumb blocks. The outside 8 blocks, in some cases, there's 2 different colors. In some cases, it's just one fabric. In some cases, they're not big enough to be a whole block, and I've pieced them together as well. And you will see that I made this quilt as a quilt as you go project. And I quilted it using just diagonal straight lines, making a grid. But when I show you the back, you will see that the back of this quilt is also just using a 9 patch of scrappy blocks, and it worked out really fine to make it as a quilt as you go project. I used all sorts of squares in this project. It was fun and it got rid of a lot of squares. Here is another quilt I made using stars. And in this case, on the left-hand side, the stars are center block is just a 9 patch. The outside is pieced together, and that worked out well too. Here's another quilt using stars, and again, they're a bit wonky. I was a bit more specific about the color. All of the stars and the points for the stars are the same fabric, but you will notice that the 8 blocks around the star, some of them are not the same, but they read similar. This is the same type of pattern, only this one I believe I made out of 6.5-inch squares, whereas the other one was 3.5-inch squares and a baby quilt. But this one was made using Christmas fabrics and greens and reds, and it was a really nice quilt to make and fast to make as well. This is the same type of thing. I just used a whole bunch of squares and picked out certain spots to put the center of a star, and the 8 fabrics around it, I just made flip and sew. In this case here, anytime I make a row quilt, I always put a row of stars somewhere. These are not really very scrappy, but it still is a different kind of star. And in this case here, I made these stars in the upper right-hand corner. This was all 2.5-inch squares. And once again, the center star of the star is similar. The points of the star are similar fabric color. And the blue around the outside is a combination of all kinds of dark blues, dark navies. This quilt was made in 6 different sections. I used a lot of 2.5-inch squares to make the majority of the blocks. The upper right was stars. The center left was pineapples, the lower right was butterflies, and the other 3 blocks that filled in are houses, trees, and just a bunch of wavy lines. And I really like this quilt. I had a lot of fun making that and figuring it out. The last quilt I have here to show you, again, a variety of stars made with a 9 patch, and they're not all the same size when finished. So in this case, I made the stars, then placed them randomly to fit together in some kind of a pattern, and then what I did was add strips of similar color background fabric in between the blocks to fill in the spaces so that it would make enough background for the quilt to be made. Most of my quilts, I must say, I quilt them with just a straight line of quilting stitch, but I have a lot of fun putting them together, and I use any kind of method I think is appropriate at the time. That's it.